Hello everyone, welcome to United in Action, Holistic Climate Solutions Edition. This is a special session that we're hosting here at the Tzu Chi Center for Compassionate Relief, live as part of the 7th day of the Holistic Climate Solutions Summit. And so, as a slight background in terms of where we are, how we got here, over the past week, Tzu Chi, as a part of New York City Climate Week and UN General Assembly's High Level Week, have been gathering people from around the world to be in dialogue over 22 events and 7 days to explore the different types of climate solutions that already exist to tackle the climate crisis here, today, and right now. And with that reflection, we've been able to build coalitions, dissolve silos, and bring partners together in ways that extend beyond like the conversations that we have on panels, but really into authentic dialogue to scheme on how we can create a better future together. And so it's with this framing that I'm really excited to introduce two of our co-organizers. We have Reverend Dallas Conyers, who's our Senior Programs and Justice and Equity Diversity Inclusion Manager at the Southeast Climate and Energy Network, where she really focuses on empowering everyone to really live through this purpose of renewable energy access. She does wonderful work as the U.S. Climate Action Network's international liaison, alongside with many other illustrious titles. And beside her, we also have Steve Chiu, who's the project specialist at Buddhist Tzu Chi Charity Foundation's Global Partnerships Affairs Department, where we're really exploring how we can empower people at both a local and global level to take action that extends beyond our own selves and impacts and empowers communities. So together we're going to be reflecting on not only the summit itself, but what we as individuals can do to take action to help not only improve our own lives and our personal behaviors, but extend to transforming communities and impacting the whole world. And so we're so happy you guys are here with us. We're gonna have a small Q&A session after the commented portion. So I encourage you, as you're listening, to think about all the cute things you wanna ask our panelists. So with this, I'll start with our first question, which is really let's set the scene, right? It's been 7 days at the Holistic Climate Solutions Summit. Dallas, you came all the way from South Carolina. I would love to hear what was the impetus that brought you here to organize with us, and some of the experiences that you've had along the way through these 7 days.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you everybody here, because your presence here is part of the reason why I wanted to come out. This climate crisis literally involves all sectors of our lives. It involves our air, it involves our water, it involves the fabric we use for our clothing, it involves even where we eat and how we eat and what we eat, where we sleep. I mean, anything and everything you can think of is affected by climate. And that, therefore, so many people are just like, I can't touch that. I can't be involved in that. It's way too big. I'm just gonna keep going along until somebody tells me exactly what to do. And having the opportunity to come together and speak to so many different people, working across so many interconnections that we need to lift up, it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. So this has been my blessing, working with you guys, meeting you guys, and learning.
I love that. And so I'll pass it over to Sarah. You came all the way from Taiwan. What inspired you to be here in this space with us? Would love to hear your journey, your trip, and your experience being at the summit itself.
Yes, thank you, Steve. First of all, I would like to thank everyone to be here to join us, and I also like to thank all our partners organizations to put everything together, and also our Tzu Chi volunteers there, and to work behind the scene and to make everything together. And yes, as Steve says, I'm from Taiwan. I jumped onto a 14 hours flight to be here to join you guys, and since pandemic is keeping us apart, so I'm very thankful to be here to see everyone still working hard to work for the climate change, and so I'm very grateful and very happy to see everyone, and even a small group can make a difference, so we can join together and make the world better. Thank
I love
you.
that, Sarah. I think both of your reflections on how this challenge may seem very big, but through these small steps, we can really take actions, right? I know during the summit itself, we had the opportunity not only to be in panels and discussions together, but really interact with the various co-organizers and the Tzu Chi volunteers who have really been supporting this space. I'd love to hear what's the impression of the space, the culture and space we've really been able to cultivate this week.
Okay, so love. If you saw, there are little symbols of the character going around, and that is so embodied in this space, this building, the way the volunteers work not only amongst each other, but with the people visiting this space. It is just filled with so much love, and that makes all the difference in the world when talking about a topic that most people associate with doom and gloom. It invigorates and energizes. It gives new perspective of how we can do this work and why we should do this work. And the food. The food has been amazing, especially for me because I'm required to say it as a vegan. I'm vegan. And they managed to do 7 days of plant-based meals. It is full of variety, color, awesome nutrition, and I couldn't have asked for more. And it also gives rise to the lie that you can't be plant-based and full and happy. So it was awesome here.
Yeah, I love that you're lifting up the creativity of meals, right? And thinking about so often as we think about the climate crisis and the solutions we have, it's very limiting, right? We narrow in on very technical solutions and we aren't able to broaden our scope of imagining what is possible, right? When it comes to plant-based diets, the sheer amount of creativity that we were able to experience this week was profound. And I know, Sarah, you were able to not only participate in the summit itself, but really be outside of the space, engaging with Climate Week and our partners abroad, speaking to innovation. I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of where you were able to really go, experience, and what took place.
Yes, before that, I have to say that I'm part of a vegetarian group as well. So it's very nice to see more people are taking on the part of being vegetarian to protect the earth. And of course, I have been not only being here at Tzu Chi Center, I also visit some of activities outside. And I think they keep saying that a small group or one person's action makes a difference. So that's why we need to must act together. And we also visit some of the groups in other areas and to focus on the relief, the disaster relief. And many of the disaster relief is just actually caused by the climate change. So it's kind of a cycle. So if we can break the cycle of a climate change or slow it down, and so for many of the part of the world can have a better life. And we are very fortunate to have a good life. We are not worried about our food systems. We are not worried about our food. We always have food on our table. But in some of other countries, when you see on the news, they were affected by the flood, like Pakistan or in the South Sudan. Children do not have food to go to school. But in order to change their education, their futures, we need to put them to school. But before that, food is very important. So as a part of Tzu Chi, we try to not only promote the environmental protections, we also support the relief, disaster relief by sending food to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I think you're really speaking to a holistic approach, right? In that, as we work on the climate crisis, it's not just about addressing this one challenge, but looking at the roots. What are these root causes, underlying factors that drive inequity and put people in spaces of vulnerability? And so before we move on to speaking about solutions that were uplifted from the summit itself, I'd love to also maybe pass it back to Dallas to speak a little bit about what you experienced with the empowerment of volunteers and how it can be this model of creating catalytic change.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you for that. Because what I saw with the volunteer work here is that so often people don't want to volunteer because they feel like they're easily replaceable. Somebody else can do it. The work that they do is just pedantic, and it's not them as a person that's needed. It's just a body filling a space. And we have things that we want to do with our own bodies in our own time. So just being called out to do something that anybody else can do is not very attractive for many people. But what we see here at Tzu Chi is we have people who are engaging in substantive work as volunteers. They're doing work that once they come in and commit to being present, We need that person doing that specific thing. They're not only allowing themselves to be teachable and learn new tasks and skills or use their own gifts that they have to do things that are so important, like greeting you at the door and setting that atmosphere, making sure that the media is up and running, making sure that people know where they're going and where they belong so safety can be complied with. They're also bringing in their own skill sets that they use in their everyday careers. So these valuable skills, and they're using them in these spaces so that even nonprofit and charitable work is done in a professional and effective manner. And that I saw being really utilized in this world of Tzu Chi work. And I honestly think that might be, in addition to the love, why some of your volunteers are so committed to the work, because they are valuable here.
Yeah. There's a feeling of belonging, right? Like that the purpose is aligned with that sentiment of belonging. Mm-hmm. And I love that reflection. So maybe continuing on in terms of thinking about holistic solutions to address our climate crisis, it's about evolving our understanding of what can constitute as a solution, and then also what are the underlying values that allow us to bring more people into the movement, right? Like if the movement feels overwhelming, if we're saying to ourselves that like this climate crisis is too big to tackle because it's also deeply interconnected, right? But it also speaks to say that everyone has a place in this movement to solve the crisis because it's so deeply interconnected, right? We need farmers to become empowered to grow more climate resilient food so that by the time the climate crisis strikes, we're not also trying to deal with the disaster impacts while also like being deeply food insecure, right? These are all conversations that we had over the past 7 days. I'd love to pass it over to Sarah to maybe reflect with us. What are some of the emergent solutions that you were beginning to hear people who are on the ground taking action to address the climate crisis?
Yes. Tzu Chi is a volunteer-based organization, so we have volunteers working in their own communities. Like I will be a volunteer in my own communities by doing the visiting care CBN, do the environmental recycling and everything. And I would like to share with you our works in South Africa actually. In South Africa, we have many of our local volunteers. They are managing the vegetable gardens, and the vegetable gardens actually is to provide food for the HIV-related children or orphans, so they can have enough food, and then they can go to school, and they can have their own life, to have a good life there. And so those local volunteers, they actually gradually expand their charity works into other countries. They jump on the cars and then they go to the neighboring country to promote the charity work, environmental protections. They bring the concept of vegetable gardens and then to provide food to the people in need. And they have to bring them all the concept of helping others, neighbors by neighbors, and villages by villages. So if you are interested, I also can share with you the relief work in Myanmar that we do.
Yes. Yeah, no, Sarah, this is great. And in thinking about vegetable gardens, it speaks to this idea of what we lifted up in day 2 as we explored local to global around food sovereignty, right? And how there's a differentiation between if we're trying to create food security, where it's very prescriptive, we as the external organization are saying like, these are things that you need and we're gonna give them to you, rather than like, if we're able to work with these communities and identify that they have a vegetable garden there where they're growing the own crops that they want to plant, they're given the tools and skills to be trained in a way that they feel truly empowered. We're not simply giving them power alone, but we're removing obstacles for them to be able to access the things they truly need. And so I'll pass it over to Dallas for some reflections on her side on solutions too.
Can I add to the food skill book?
Yeah.
So a part of food sovereignty is also acknowledging that some people have cultivated styles of food production that have been ignored as their land was taken away from them. Re-acknowledging that knowledge source that's been passed down from generation to generation, and then saying that is knowledge that was developed in direct relationship to the land that you're on, and probably is a better practice than what we can bring in from outside.
That's right.
That part of sovereignty has so much potential for creating on the ground solutions that will last multi-generationally, even as those supporting organizations are transitioning to other locations of focus. Right. What was the question you asked?
Oh man, no, before that, right? Like it's about entry plans and exit points, right? Like too often, I think within civil society groups, we urgently respond to crisis, right? But if we don't plan an exit plan, if we aren't leaving the community in a better place, more well networked with other organizations, more imbued with access to resources from local government than we were before we entered, we risk creating these cycles of dependency that once we leave, we strip them of any sense of agency that we may have imparted upon them, right? I see you nodding.
Yes, that is the bedrock of what we need to do in local to global solutions. Because we say, we did this program 20 years ago, we did this program 10 years ago, we gave this money, why these communities, the same communities over and over again in need? And it's just like what you said, it's about social infrastructure just as much as it's about actual infrastructure of bridges and roads and inputs for farm. It's about creating that acknowledgement that you have the knowledge right here in this community, you have the ability right here in this community. It's also about putting in wealth generating cycles so that the community can build its own financial structures and its own financial connections even after that organization leaves. And that's a direct part of what we need in local to global solutioning, because the global work that we do is never going to be able to address all the minute intrinsic needs of each individual community. Just crossing from one time zone to the next has so many differences. How can we expect a global warehouse or a global community to say, this is what you need in Spartanburg, South Carolina versus Athens, Georgia, right? They're very short distances apart, but they're totally different communities, totally different needs, totally different expectations and cultures. And therefore, we need to allow that the community infrastructure be strong so that they're able to inform the global community about what they need in a real way.
I love this reflection on how we can move from prescriptive and instructive, very patriarchal, right, models of working and collaborating into truly co-creation, where we are inherently valuing and weighing the community's inputs on the same plane of power, right? To say that we aren't here to tell you what you need. We're here to listen and to provide you the resources that are rightfully yours, right? And so also coming back to wealth generating structures as a climate solution, right? Like if we recognize that specific communities will be more impacted over the period of climate crisis, right? How do we ensure that they are well equipped financially to not become dependent? And so as we continue this conversation, would love for you to follow up on the original question, which is like, what were some of the learnings that we were able to explore over these 7 days in relation to addressing solutions for the climate crisis?
Yeah, so for example, one of our esteemed panelists on day 2, Zachary Phillips, he lifted up the fact, he's from the small island states, he lifted up the fact that one of the smallest funds, the smallest fund, which is the Adaptation Fund, is the one that these local communities actually have access to generate their own solutioning. Everything else, they have to wait years of just all the wrangling and going through all the different types of language and getting access and approvals, years for that to come down. But the one fund that they say, this is what we need and this is what we can do and this is what the money we can use to implement it, is the smallest, least funded one, the Adaptation Fund. And he said that if they had more dollars in that Adaptation Fund and even more access to things like the Mitigation Fund, then you would see instantaneous almost improvement of the needs of the people of the small island states. It wouldn't always be the small island states going, help us, help us, help us. It would be the small island states saying, hey, we're now able to access the resources that the rest of the world, the developed world has, and therefore we now have the opportunity to show that we are our own best experts and we are capable. And another one, sorry, I'll stop.
No, it's okay. Keep going. One more.
I actually wanted to turn it on to Sarah.
Oh,
because she was going to talk about community and empowerment and engagement.
Yes, as I just mentioned about Myanmar, I would like to share with you that Myanmar was experiencing a serious flood in 2008. You might think it's a long time ago, but the ripple effect is actually still happening right now. At that time, Tzu Chi volunteers went over to a really flooded farming areas. So we provide relief, help, relief work, emergency relief goods to the farmers. And after the emergency phase, we provide them the very good quality rice seeds and good quality that is suitable for the land. So they began to rebuild their farm, their paddy fields, and we share with them the idea of helping out and reaching out to each other. And there was one farmer, he adopted the concept. So when he go home, he make sure a pot of rice they want to cook for that meals. So maybe let's say 3 cups of rice into the pot that he wants to cook, and then he will reach out and to grab a handful of the rice and then put into another jar. So every day he will do that. So what happened to the jar when it's full? The jar will send it to the people that is actually in need. So it created the seed of rice actually create a cycle for other people. They have own food to eat, but they also stock enough rice for others people to eat, the people in need to eat. And right now, they actually expanded. They are not only providing the food, they have saved enough good quality seeds to other villagers. So other farmers has a good seed to grow their own rice, and they have a good harvest. So it's there was a story that says that a family actually pay out 30 years of debt just because the cycle of the goodness and cycle of people that will want to share their goodwill to others.
That's beautiful, Sarah. I think it's a reflection of the power that comes forth when we trust communities, right? And how oftentimes within a space, we can perceive people who are victims of climate crisis as those without a sense of agency, without the knowledge that it's their faults that something like this happens to them, right? And I know we've already mentioned Pakistan a bit. I'd love it to turn it over back to Dallas to maybe reflect with us a little bit of the loss and damage conversation that took place in terms of just what does it mean for us as people who are working in the climate space to reflect really on how we within the developed nations are generating the majority of climate impacts, but really absorbing very little of the repercussions of those actions.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, because that is a hard conversation for many people. As loss and damage to start with is the idea or the acknowledgement that we are experiencing losses, loss of life, loss of culture, loss of identity, loss of massive grief, loss due to loss of life. So loss of that impetus to just go on and do better for some people. And understanding that we're having these losses faster than we can adapt, both physically, mentally, and socially, and economically. And as Steve said, the developed countries, America especially, has a historical and current impact that far outweighs the collective, even in just America alone, the collective input into what's driving climate change, such as global emissions. And it gets hinky because people are like, well, people in the United States right now are experiencing losses and damages. We have climate refugees coming from the coast on both the east and the west. We have in the Gulf South. We have people being burned out of the West Coast. How dare you think about sending more money overseas to fund loss and damage? Well, the fact is, because it's a lot of our fault. We have to fund it because we are a part of a global community. And we talked about this in depth. We will not be able to run away and just isolate as America and say, well, it happened across the pond, as they say. You know, it happened in other countries, so it doesn't touch us, right? We can take care of Americans here. But the fact is, economies fall worldwide. It affects our economy here. Food systems fall worldwide. It affects our food systems here and our food burden. And we import just about everything, let's face it. So if food goes down in other parts of the world, if economies and manufacturing goes in other part of the world, and let's think about global instability and peacekeeping times. We're used to being a peaceful nation, but if we have massive wars and unrest, just like how we are funding and putting trillions of dollars into the Ukraine conflict, think about how much money we would have to be putting in around the world if people are starving, people are losing their homes, people are just crying out for help when we were part of the cause. We're going to get repercussions if we allow people to suffer as a result of something that we led the crisis in. And then finally, it's just a moral obligation from my standpoint, right? You don't do something wrong and say, oops, sorry, and expect that if you drop a plate, saying sorry doesn't fix the plate. You have to use the resources of glue and time to fit it back together. And then you acknowledge that it is not the same as it was before. So you treat it differently than you treat your other plates. You treat it specially. And that's what we need to do with the worst of the world. And we need to acknowledge that loss and damage is our responsibility, and it's a global necessity. It is not a charity. It is not aid. It is not relief. It is what these countries have earned from our actions and being impacted by our actions.
That's a beautiful reflection, Dallas, and thank you for that. I think this is some of the work that is ongoing at COP27, and it's something that we continue to build coalition around. And I think coming to this idea of moral obligation, it's really about values, right? Part of this Holistic Climate Solutions Summit has been this exploration of how faith values and spiritual values fundamentally underline our war on climate crisis, right? Like how we mobilize, how we empower and inspire people together is really around how can we lift up these faith values that are so integral to each one of our lives. And I'd love to turn it over to Sarah to maybe reflect with us a little bit about how we not just have this like paradigm of helping people materially, but we also help them spiritually, emotionally, and interrogate this question of what it is that we need versus what it is we want.
Okay, so as a girl, I love to shop. I have to admit that. And but as a our founder, Tzu Chi's founder, Master Zhen Yan, once teach us that when you go up to shop, is it what you need or what you want? So I think of myself as that majority of the time is what I want. It's not really necessarily what I need, because I think I already have enough material goods. Mm-hmm. But by looking at the commercial ad or by looking at others, I feel like, oh, this is something I want. But by thinking about what you need or what you want, it actually can be more conservative on spending money, but by consuming more resources. So it's an eco-economics that for us to think need or want before we go out and shop. And so it's I think it's a really good concept for us to maybe take home. Thank you.
I love that, especially because we're thinking about like in this summit especially, right? What kind of cycles are we perpetuating, right? And in this particular example, it's the question of, are we perpetuating a cycle of consumption, or is there a better alternative, right? Similarly with loss and damage and food systems and food sovereignty, are we perpetuating cycles of destruction and dependency, or are we creating cycles of liberation and empowerment? Right? And within that same line, I'd love to continue this cycles conversation and think about what does it mean to perpetuate the opposite of consumption. And in this summit, we spoke about community, right? So how can we perpetuate cycles of community as a way to build resilience to the climate crisis and perhaps the invisible effects of the climate crisis, eco-anxiety, climate dread, and all of those things. And so we held an entire day on mental well-being. I'd love to pass it over to Dallas to reflect a little bit with us on that.
Yeah, so, for me, I led the yoga session on mental well-being. And the first thing I started with was testing the security of the floor, right? The climate crisis is big, and for so many of us, it feels, okay, I'll speak in I often feel like the floor is about to drop right out from under me. I feel like the ground is shaky. I feel like All of my support systems are just about to just evaporate in the air. This is my climate anxiety, right? Not trying to pass it on. But the reason why I do the testing the floor thing is because it's good to remind myself that the ground is still solid. The ground is still beneath me. The air is still breathable right now. You know, I am still physically here and I'm still physically secure, no matter what conversations may sound like. And that acknowledgement of how we interact with our current environment is so important in dealing with climate anxiety and eco grief. Being present in the now moment instead of trying to live in the future and the fears of the future, and also understanding in that now moment how you interact with your present reality. What energy are you giving out to people? What energy are you putting back into the earth? Are you tending for the soil around you? Tending to the soil around you? Are you loving on the non-human objects around you? Are you putting good energy out there, even alongside your work and your lifestyle? Because then that helps you understand what you're allowing yourself to receive. So climate anxiety and eco grief is really about allowing yourself to invest in your current mind state, so that as you decide what you give out and what you get and you take in, you can also help others be mindful. Just like you do one-by-one work in the community, you could do one-by-one work within your family and your friends of saying, hey, we're still here, we're still alive, we're still okay, and let's use this moment of being okay to make the next person feel like they're okay, and they can also take action that carries them to a better destination and a better future. Because I don't know about you, but when I try to work in exhaustion or grief or anxiety, it's a mess. But if I take a few moments and take a nap, do some breathing, maybe eat something, it's a lot better.
Right. I love this idea of working through a place of joy, right? And how, like, if we are to build community, if we are to build moments, it's not inviting people to the struggle, but rather it's inviting people to the party. And I love that came from Colette Pinchon Battle as part of our reflections on how global solutions are failing local communities, right? Recognizing that the local really needs to organize, the local needs to build power. And so I'd love to turn it over to Sarah, maybe to reflect with us, how does Tzu Chi really build community? How do we organize? You spoke a little bit about volunteerism. Would love to hear more.
Yes, actually in Tzu Chi, we have Tzu Chi volunteers all over the world. At least 50 countries have Tzu Chi volunteers. And as you know, in different communities, different culture, different life of works, and we adopt the local cultures, and then but we share the same thing, that is same great love. We reach out to other peoples. We promote the environmental protection concept, and whenever we see it on the TV, on the news, we might think that's far away from them. And when we turn off the TV, we see that, oh, we are not very close to them, so that's not really affecting us. But no, it's really affecting us. As Dalit says, that it's we are in the earth communities. So one person in one community change another person's life, and then we expand to another person, another group, another villages. So we are changing the lives there.
Steve, I wanted to ask you, because you were a part of our art night, right? And you were talking about performative art versus another type of art. How did that impact you with climate grief and eco-anxiety?
Yeah, I love the question. I think we had this wonderful exploration on our fourth night where we were envisioning and exploring what it means to create a better future together. Right, and as part of that, we invited a couple of artists, Rebecca Rivola, Saba Ascari, Sarah Wolcott, together to really be in community and think about the power of art making. Right, and as we were going through these different art practices, we realized that all of the art exercises that we had designed for the night were not performative, right? That is to say that one person's on stage and they're putting on a show for you, but rather it was participatory, that everyone has a role to play, right? And I think it jives really well with this conversation that we're hearing around being interdependent and interconnected as well, right? Because oftentimes we see creativity as something that is there's a sanctity to it, right? There's a sacredness that you need to be trained, you need to be schooled and educated in order to be a part of this elite group of artists and makers. You have to be professional. But when we look back at how children make art, when we look back at how indigenous communities and we historically have created art before institutionals like co-opted the entire understanding of art making, it was really by participating with each other, being in play together, and through that playfulness, we were able to exchange wisdom, stories, build community, and have senses of healing, right? So as we think about what it means to have holistic climate solutions, it is about integrating art making, creativity, and participatory practices where people feel like they belong in the movement, right? That it's not something for the policymakers alone and the people at the UN to tackle this challenge alone, but that we all have a role to play. And whether that is to tell our story, to make the crisis personal, to take action at a local level, all of these things are things that I think as we realize we each have our own unique role, it's interrogating what we ourselves are best at and finding ways to allow that to flourish in service to this larger movement. I also love, Sarah, that you're talking about love, right? And that we were able to reflect throughout the many days about this secret sauce of the climate movement, right? What is it about holisticness that is so intriguing to people, right? We talk about technical solutions, we talk about the science, the data behind the climate crisis, but how often do we talk about the love that we have for each other, the love that we have for the planet, and the inspirational power that love compels people to take action? And I know, Sarah, you were speaking to also this notion that we must act, right? And I'd love for you to reflect on this in the intersection of what it means to love our planet.
Yes, we want to love, we need to love ourselves, and we to prepare ourselves, we love ourselves, and then we love our neighbors, we love our children, we love we love our communities, and we actually expand our love to the people in need across the country, across the continent. So that's the magic word that can bring everybody in peace. As long as you love other peoples, the war might cease. There will be no conflicts to each other, since we have been seeing for the conflicts as a couple of years ago, the Syrian, they have internal conflicts, and a lot of their people will have to flee from their homes to other countries. For example, in Turkey, there are a lot of refugees relocated into the countries. And in Tzu Chi, we actually built a school there for the children, for the refugee children. And in the school, we provide two classes. One is for the children to adopt the new culture, the culture, the language in Turkey. But in other classes, they will teach them their own cultures, their own language. So they will have for both sides. So they will never forget their roots, but they're adopting the new culture as well. So that the school is built with love, because we want them to help to love others. When there was once that Taiwan actually has an earthquake, and the children heard about the earthquake, they even run a little fundraise among their peers. Then they say that we want to help Taiwan to rebuild. The amount is not great, but there's a love. We want the children is full of love. They want to reach out to others, so they do what they can to reach out to other person. And Master Zheng heard about the little fundraise, and she says that that's the most large amount that she received from those children.
That's beautiful, Sarah. I think in that love is not about the financial amount, right? But it's this commitment of energy, intention, attention, and action, right? No matter where we are, what means we have, there are ways that we can give to this movement to strengthen it and find ways to both heal our planet and heal each other, right? And heal ourselves. I want to lift up two things. The first, just the power of building space, both for education and community, right? Like part of what makes Holistic Climate Solutions Summit so exciting for us this year is the fact that we intentionally built out 7 days of conversations structured around ideas that are maybe less explored within our traditional climate movements, right? And to hold space to say that these are integral parts of the work that must happen in order to ensure that we have a just and equitable transition towards a better future together. And then also reflecting about like how the world may cease to end, right? There was a wonderful representative from the Alliance of Small Island States who was reflecting on loss and damage. And one of the common pushbacks to loss and damage is that if your island is gonna flood, if all of the coastlines are rising, why would we give you money to try to like build your country back if it's just gonna inevitably flood all the way until it's gone, right? And whereas the world may cease, people will forever be there, right? And if the people aren't there in that physical space, they may move to a different country, but it doesn't change the fact that we have each other and we need resourcing, we need support. So maybe final round of reflections, I'll start with Dallas. Other solutions that emerge from the summit. Give me a rapid fire and then I'll pass it over to Sarah.
It's so fast. Okay, so first off, we definitely need to fund loss and damage. We talked about the conversation we have, but conversation only does so much. Conversations is vital in summits like this where we're talking and we're bringing our heads together and we're planning for future actions together. But the fact of the matter is, a part of faith is funding. You need to put your money where your mouth is, and you need to be able to give people resources to do that work. So we need to fund loss and damage, and also we need to make communities able to access those financial systems, the GCF and all the others, so that they can actually use those resources to build and help and rebuild their communities. And we, like Steve was saying, it's about humanity being human, right? We love to say we're better than the other animals, but we're also animals. And if we're just like, well, only the strong survive, then we might as well be bears and wolves, right? Because it's the human aspect, it's the caring aspect that differentiates us. It's not just our thumbs from other animals. And so we must live into that. We must preserve the cultures that humanity has so kindly and lovingly developed over the millennia, and we must acknowledge and preserve the knowledge that they bring from those millennia in existence, so we can't just let them disappear. We also have the vision for equitable climate action. We uplifted that on day 4. It's a policy platform that actually uses bottom-up solutioning and practices. It was developed among over 200 people representing thousands, multi-thousands of people in different organizations, over 200 plus organizations as a part of the United States Climate Action Network, and it's continually updated. Why? So that actually reflects the needs of the people that it would represent and who could call upon it and use it to petition as self-advocates, because we need to advocate. We need to advocate for ourselves. We need to call for accountability from our government. And so what we did was we created a policy platform. So even if you have absolutely no experience in policy measures, but you say, we need something to do about water, I'm gonna go into the water section of the VICA on the VICA website and pull out some of that wording and present it to my policymaker. And I've just done advocacy. And I didn't go above my head because I used the resources already available for me. I could go on and on and on, but accountability, self-advocacy, and funding the measures, not just talking about the measures, are the top 3 that I would lift, and doing it with love.
Beautiful, thanks Dallas. I think, and then over to Sarah, I know we had an entire day dedicated on plastics. Would love any reflections on those solutions that came forth, and then everything else as well.
Yes. It is important. Actually, we promoted from the top policy making and the Grassroots Act. Taiwan is an island. It's an island, and it's actually threatened by the high rise of sea levels. So we are kind of the climate change victims here. But we are not so severe as some of the islands, but this is something that we need to face, and it's happening right now. If we don't stop it, and then it will really just hit us. And as in Taiwan, we actually promote the recycling, and we have a really strict rules. And our garbage trunk actually have rules. They will follow by a recycling trunk. If you are tossing a recycling material into the garbage trunk, no. The workers will actually take it out and ask you not to do that. Otherwise, they will fine you. So this is for the government. They enforce the law that we need to do recyclings. And as a Tzu Chi, part of a Tzu Chi, we are promoting not only to recycling. We want you to reduce the garbages. Like when I go out, I will have my own cup. Oh, I don't have it right now with me, but I have my own cup. We have my own containers. So if I want to have my dinners, I will take out my containers and say, please put my dinners in there, and I'll take it home. Or when I go to a coffee shop, I will ask them that, please use my cup to fill out my coffees. So one cup matters. So one piece of garbage is reduced. That's one piece better for the work. So that's something I want to encourage everyone, that we use our reusable cups, and I believe that everyone has a very beautiful reusable cup. So let's take it out and then share with other people.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. And you transition perfectly into our next question, right? Which is really what actions individuals can take. We still got time. Don't worry, Dallas. And I love that, like, in thinking about solutions, this summit has lifted up such a diaspora of possibility, right? In addition to everything that our panelists has reflected on, we also spoke about incentives, right? Like, what are proper incentives to drive innovation and good action? And where are misaligned incentives, where perhaps the way our policies are written are promoting good faith actors to damage the climate in an attempt to like align themselves with regulations and policies that are ill-informed. We spoke about subsidies and the powerful ways that governments can shift industries through equitable consultation, of course, to allow for them to really advance to that next era of where humanity needs to go, right? We spoke about the importance of just transition in all of this, right? And how without this like theory of nothing about us without us, we will not be able to make sure that everyone is here with us along this journey, right? We must not leave anyone behind along this path. And in order to do that, it must be a consultative, co-creative process, and to create the mechanisms that are in play right now that organizations are working on. And so for all the other solutions, we definitely encourage you all to check out the other recordings, but I'd love to pass it back to my panelists for one final round before we go to Q&A, which is, what solutions can we take, right? In this moment where climate crisis is happening to us right now, right? We're experiencing it, but there's hope. There's action, and we find hope in action. I'd love to start with Dallas and then pass to Sarah, who has already spoken to us about like some of these recyclables and ways that we can be self-sustainable, but how can we really take actions ourselves?
Okay, so I'm actually gonna ask you to go back a little bit and sit still first. Sit still and learn yourself, learn what motivates you, learn what gives you joy, as Steve brought up, every day, and then find ways to work in that. Because when I say climate impacts everything, I mean everything. So I don't care if you still into action figures. If that's your thing, then look into how action figures are distributed and manufactured and how they are transported, and make action figures cleaner and greener and recycled from one child to the next instead of thrown into the landfill. If you are into cows and milk production, then look at how cows can be treated better and maybe do some indigenous farming, cattle and husbandry practices instead of the mass commercialization. You can do anything and everything to support this world. Just like with the volunteers we discussed, there is no skill set that is not needed. You can just be into organizing papers. We need you. You could be into growing grass. We need you to figure out how to grow grass with less water. So first, take a step back and go into yourself. Find who you are, and then take up your spot in this global revolution of mitigating climate change. And if you want to take it bigger, get directly involved in the organization. look at your community and look at the facilities and structures in your community and say, how can we do that cleaner and greener? Or if there are good things that need to be replicated that are present in your community, say, who do I need to talk to in the next community so that they know how to do it there? And then always advocate, advocate, advocate. I don't care if you speak English as a native language or wherever you live, if you speak that language natively. I don't care if you graduated only from intermediate school or if you have a doctorate. Your voice counts, and speak to the people who make decisions and make them take time to listen to you, especially if you're in America, because that's their job. We employ them. That's what our taxes pay them for. So take your voice out there and make sure you're heard, and make sure you get a group of people who back you up and say, no, listen to them. Listen to us. We don't like this policy. It's doing bad in our community. Do it over. And this time, put us at the table when you're doing it over so you don't come out with this nonsense. And make sure that you pay attention at the very least so that when opportunities come for you to get involved, you don't find out about it a week later. So just be present and engaged and do what brings you joy. And that way you'll do it whether or not somebody pays you.
I love that. And I think in moving from a place of joy rather than fear, grief, and anxiety, right? It's one thing to be nervous about what the future holds. But if we can't be joyous in the lived present, like what kind of life is this, right? And so thinking about also like the power of community, kind of like what Dallas spoke about, we need people to back us up, right? If we are in this struggle alone and isolated, there's not going to be a good time. Like you're going to burn out so fast. But with community, you really are able to envelop and be resilient. And so if you find yourself already part of a community, right, thinking who's around you that you can really bring into the work, and then finally ensuring that you're not doing this alone. Pass it over to Sarah for concluding remarks.
Yes, actually, we are not alone. We have all partners. Even on the stage, on the audience, we are not alone. You always can find help or assistance from others. And then I would like to share with you. Right now, I want to transform myself into some models. As the jacket, the coat, the skirts, the shirts I'm wearing right now, it's actually made by the plastic bottles. The plastic bottles that we recycled, we have volunteers recycle the bottles, sort the colors, and then they will transfer into the fabric and then into the clothes and also the blankets that we use to distribute into the disaster relief. So that's the work that we work together to do the recycle and then to reach out to people in need who are facing the disaster relief. So all the work needs a lot of people, and every single of us counts. So we are not alone, and we can work together to mitigate the climate change.
That's beautiful. Thanks so much, Sarah. Speaking to innovation and ingenuity, right? Thinking about what resources we have around us already that are raw materials for creation, right? New York City's bump crop, the thing that we have in abundance is trash, right? This is the one thing that we've been reflecting on in our Local to Global Day, right? Where it's like, what do we have in abundance? How can we use it? Well, the thing that New York City has the most of right now are these plastic bags filled with trash. Is this a resource, or is this a something that is like an eyesore, right? It's up for us to innovate our way out of these ideas, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a deeply rooted in values idea as well. And so with this, I'm delighted to close out the panel. Super grateful that you have all joined us for United in Action. This episode is done specially live, and so we encourage you to, after the panel ends, to meet with us, chat with us, ask your questions. We'd love to be in dialogue, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Goodbye.